You are listening to Kickspot.
Now, transitioning into the book here, I do not know a single Mexican-American author or leadership guru.
Right.
So you would probably be our first.
The only one. The only one.
The OG, the original.
dope.
Okay, so 10, 15 years down the line, when people are reading this book, we say, he was on Kickspot.
You heard it here first. World premiere.
So tell, what got you into writing the book?
Yeah, so I'll set the tone with I am not a writer by trait, and growing up, reading and writing was my worst subject. Aside from some Harry Potter books, I don't think I voluntarily read growing up. Even in high school, I did not read any of the books it was mandatory to read. I would go on Cliff Notes or watch the documentary or go on YouTube and watch any videos that I could find about it, and then that's how I would pass the classes.
Yeah.
My writing classes. And even in college, I did not write. I would stay up the night before, trying to cram and write the papers and stuff like that. So if anybody's listening is I always wanted to write a book, but I'm a shitty writer, you can do it. Because I was a really bad writer.
Huh.
What made me want to write it was during my first or second year working at LinkedIn. I was 23, 24 at the time. Fresh college grad, you're really excited to just learn on the job and everything. I found myself surrounded with all these other amazing people that went to these amazing schools that were all so interested in self-development. And it was one of the first times that I was around that kind of vibe. These people that went to Harvard, Berkeley, all these amazing schools that I look up to. And they were all outside of their day jobs, they were doing other stuff. They were going to classes, they were going to trainings, they were reading books. And my high school friends, they didn't just read books on the side. It was something we did because we had to. And growing up, for me too, it was I didn't read because I didn't read because I thought it would be good for me to better myself. It was something that I had to do, so I just did it. But around the same time, I picked up this book called Smart Cuts by Shane Snow, and I recommend it to everybody that I meet. That was the first book that I read on my own, and that I actually wanted to read and enjoyed reading in my adult life at 24 years old. After reading that book, I was hooked. I was holy shit, there's this world of knowledge that I can learn on my own at my own pace. And nobody's telling me that I gotta do a quiz or do a paper on it. And so I went on a rampage for a few years of just learning. And in 2019, I read 47 books. The year before that was my podcast year. So I went through hundreds of podcast episodes, probably 400 podcast episodes in a year. The year before that was my documentary year. I just went through every single documentary I could find from EDMs, artists, entrepreneurs, anybody you could think of, Henry Ford, all this stuff, documentaries. I just learned as much as I could. And I didn't really have a goal in mind while I was doing all this learning. I was just it was so cool to me that I could learn on my own topics at my own pace. And it got to a point where last year I was driving down to see my sister in San Diego. We were just gonna have a lunch date, and I was listening to Think and Grow Rich audiobook. And something spoke to me in that book. When I tell people that it sounds really cheesy, it sounds really crazy, but I had this self-realization of you're being selfish by doing all this learning and not sharing it with people, especially your people, your family, your friends, people from your culture. And I started thinking, I kept driving and I was whoa, that's kind of weird, a weird thought. And I started to think about why don't my friends and family, my close people, Mexican, my people, Latinos, are underrepresented people, why don't they do more of that type of learning? And then I started to reflect on all of the books and stuff that I read, and the podcasters and the self-development people, and there were 90% white men from privileged backgrounds, So then I was that's probably it, is because the content doesn't always hit home with them.
Yeah.
The references might go over people's head. The words might be too big or extra, So then I started thinking about well, I know a lot from all these books. It would be cool if I just wrote one for my people and included my story and used more relatable examples, but writing this book truly for people of underrepresented backgrounds, whether you're a woman in tech or whether you're Latino, Black, Asian, whatever, if you feel like you're underrepresented in your community, then this book is going to speak to you. Because if you pull up like a Malcolm Gladwell, Tim Ferriss, or any of these other amazing books that I've learned so much from, you will see a stark difference between the two. You know, like I dropped on one of the last pages, you can check it. It's a Nipsey Hussle quote. That's how I end the book. On like the second to the last page is a Nipsey Hussle quote. And like little things like that I sprinkle in throughout the book. Like I reference Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I talk about his story. Ryan Reynolds, Kobe Bryant. I like do almost a whole chapter on him and how he impacted me. You know, so like that's kind of what drove me to write it. And I wanted to make sure while I wrote it, I was relatable. And it wasn't easy, man. It was really, really hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I've done really crazy things, you know?
Any Asian references of the book?
I'm trying to think. You know who Bobby Hundred is?
Yeah, I do.
So I didn't reference him, but I studied the shit out of him and his entire story.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, Bobby Hundreds is a G.
Yeah. Oh my God. He ran the streetwear for a long time.
Yeah, he did. There's a really good it's like a 30-minute docu-series on, it's called The Blueprint. So if you just YouTube The Blueprint, Bobby Hundreds. So that he was like a big inspiration too, but there's not like any specific Asian ones that I can think of off the top of my head, but there were like Asian people that I like studied and basically like analyzed their entire life and like how they became successful and what were the main things and the themes and what did they do? How did they do it? What time did they wake up? What were their habits? Like I analyzed everything, you know?
It's funny how you mentioned about like us as under kind of represented, like, you know, people like Hispanics, Blacks, women, Asians, right? And me and Jinu always talk about like, why did we start Kickspot? It's literally one of the biggest reasons why we started Kickspot is because we wanted to have a voice, but even though I don't have one right now, for for all of our Asian American, you know, people, Korean, Filipino, like, you know, two like best friends that are just like talking about everything. And we wanted to give perspective and knowledge about a ton of topics, you know, and this one is about inclusion and diversity, right? There's just one, but we've had 15 episodes and they're all so different. But our goal is to educate people for self-development. Right when you said it, I'm like, yo, that's us. Like I was in my head, like, yo, that's literally us. You know, so it's awesome.
One of the cool things too is like before I started writing the book and before I hired an editor or anything like that, because I come from a marketing background, I developed audience personas. So I think it was 3 or 4 personas that I did, and I literally on a piece of paper like wrote out, if this was a person, what would their name be? What would their background be? Like their cultural background, their age, like upbringing. I made fake people, but people that are like very likely to be like in my life or in our life or friends or family. And one of them was like a young Latino living in like South Central LA, like really growing up in like a really bad area, like has a lot of grit, like has a hustle and everything. And he just needs something to like guide him in the right direction. This is the book that's going to help him. Another one was like an Asian, young Asian American. She was 22 years old. Her name is Reina. And she wants to, and I made all this stuff up, but I have friends and family. I have like hella friends that are like, can relate to it. And I like called a bunch of them up. So like Reina is like a fresh college grad. She is very creative, but her parents want her to become a doctor or a dentist or something like that.
Nurse.
And so, or a nurse, something like that. So this book is like going to help her define what her goals could be in that creative world and like show her parents like, here, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to achieve my goals. And here's why I'm passionate about it. So that's another, and then another one was like a 33-year-old Black man, has 3 kids, married, loves his job, or doesn't like his job, but it pays the bills. And he like has like this creative hustle to want to do more, but not sure like how to start, what to do, you know, kind of like having kids already in that phase of your life where you're kind of starting to cruise. And this book is going to help him like find that spark, light that spark, and actually put action behind it.
Yeah, and the book is very simplified. It's really easy to read. And they have, you have good points throughout the chapters. I mean, my favorite, obviously, the beginning, talking about self-awareness. You have to have self-awareness to be able to get to know you and then be able to inspire others. But what would you say is your favorite part?
Probably chapter or the first step in the framework, which is it's self-concept, which is so when I was studying all these successful people, self-awareness kept coming up. It was like, this person is so successful because they're so self-aware. They know themselves, they're self-aware. And as a person who's trying to educate others on a topic, I had to try to understand what makes a person more self-aware then. And I went down this black hole of like trying to figure out the answer, and I couldn't figure it out. So I ended up finding out that when we say self-awareness on an everyday basis, we actually mean our self-concepts. And it's a psychological term.
Yeah.
So self-concepts is like, this is your present self, this is your past self, this is your could-be future self. If you deconstruct who each of those individual people are in separate settings, then you become more self-aware. You know who you are, why you are, the main like moments in your life that defined you, what gets you going, what makes you creative. Like break down as much as you can, as detailed as possible. Past self, and then looking forward, your future self. I think that exercise is the most important exercise in the entire book.
Yeah, can you go over that exercise, the questions that you ask? I
don't have them in front of me, but like off the top of my head, it's like, if you're analyzing your present self, it's do present self. Who are you right now? Like if you just had to write it in one sentence, who are you? What motivates you? What gets you going? How do you get most creative? What gets you inspired? Who gets you inspired in your life? Is there a particular music that you get like your creative flow? What environments help you focus, or what environments like produce creativity? Who in your life do you find energy from? Who in your life do you like find negativity, or like you feel like you're dragging on with? And the questions just go on, and you can make up the questions as you go, but the goal is to essentially to like better understand who you are. And once you get to the end of that exercise, there really is no end. Like I did this for myself, and I probably went to like 100 different questions on like a piece of paper and just kept writing and writing. When you get to the end of that, or whatever you define as the end is, you can look back like if it's like an analysis, you know, like if you are a science experiment and you're like going back to the lab and like, okay, like, well, we obviously need to know if we're going to build a routine for this person, like looking at yourself, then he would have to wake up at this time, go to sleep at this time. The creative flow is at this time. We would want to put the desk over here because the lighting hits this way. We would want to like have music set up on on your phone, download it on Spotify, and this is the type of music. For me, that's house music. That's like Kygo, you know, Robin Schulz. That's the music that gets me my creative flow. I like to wake up early so that I can get my workout in at 5 a.m. so that by 7:30, when I start my work day, I am 110% alert and awake. So that from 7:30 to noon, I like do my hardest work during that time. I do my interviews during that time as well, so that I'm like creatively going. And so then when you do all that exercise, the rest of the book makes sense, because you're like, okay, now I'm basing it off like real knowledge and data points and a real assessment, versus like, if I give you all these hacks and tips and tricks, yeah, they're gonna work, but they'll be a lot more effective if you like dissect who you are as a person first.
And I think people don't take the time to really do that. It doesn't, when you wake up in the morning, it's like, what is my sense of purpose?
Yeah.
And when you do a self-reflection on those questions on yourself, then you wake up more excited. And you do have that purpose, especially with everything going on right now with like COVID, everybody's working from home. Like people need to assess that. And then also based off of where you're at in your life, you could do a reassessment. It's not like that's going to work, you know, for 6 months. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what's my purpose again? I mean, do the questions again.
Yeah. And then, I say that in the book, I do it twice a year. I do it on my birthday, July 30th. I do it again July 1st when everybody else does it, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you do it at least twice a year, it's good. You can do it more frequently, like you said, or do it like big staple moments of your life, like if you're getting married or you're having a kid or you got a new job, and just asking yourself like, am I doing this because I want to do it, or am I doing it because my friends on Instagram are flexing and I want to do it too?
Yeah.
Oftentimes that happens, you know, like somebody's getting married and you start to feel like, oh, should I be getting married? Should I be having kids? Should I be getting a house? Should I be getting a car? Or like, should I be doing this job or that job? It's like, ask yourself if that's what you want first, and truly like deconstruct your response. Do you say you want to do it because you like doing it? Well, why do you like doing it? Are there past actions that you've shown that like tend to that too? Like for example, my role at diversity and inclusion at Snap, if you look at it, it looks so like out of left field. But then if you look at this other stuff that I did for the 5 years while I was at LinkedIn, my side projects and all that stuff, it all speaks to it. So when I took that role, I was like, oh yeah, obvious, it's duh. I was already doing it for free. I love doing it. Why not? You know.
Are there, as I read, you know, I typically read a lot of books as well too, as far as for like leadership or motivational books. Some of them have similar messages. Within the book that you wrote, are there concepts or theories that you came up with on your own that you're like, hey, I this is like what I went through. This really helped me out.
Yeah, the book itself is probably a summary of like 20 different of the most popular self-development books out there. You know, like you're going to learn about flow, you're going to learn about routines, habits, rituals, you're going to learn about like motivation, driving, self-assessment, all that stuff. And those are all books on their own, you know, like there's a book for flow, all that. But there's one concept that I made up because I couldn't figure out how to explain what it is all these successful people did. And it's this concept of compound learning. I made up that term because I was like, I couldn't figure out how else to explain it. It's essentially like all these successful people use every life interaction and every life moment, whether it's like intentionally doing it or if they're on the street meeting somebody or they're doing a podcast interview, they use all of this to learn, grow, compound, learn, grow, compound towards a specific goal. So like if my goal is to become a national DJ, like a global like DJ, then every single interaction that I have in my life is like an opportunity to like inch towards that goal or network or learn or ask specific questions or have an eye out for specific, I don't know, like if I'm out at a bar and I see people moving to certain songs, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to bite that piece of information. And next time I'm DJing, I'm going to like try it out, you know, listen, look. And the successful people do that. Kobe Bryant did that. Like Dwayne The Rock Johnson does that. And they do it so naturally that anybody else that's around them doesn't even realize it. They're navigating the conversations. They're asking certain questions. They're looking when other people don't even see that they're paying attention, you know? And just like anything else that's compounded, you learn something and then you use it, it compounds. You learn something else, you implement it, it compounds, and you just keep going.
Obviously, I don't want to spoil the entire book. I mean,
no, man, I don't really mind. I can talk as much as we want about it. I don't care at all. If people end up liking what I'm saying, they can buy it. If not, it's cool. You can ask whatever you want about it.
So I do have a question. So
yeah,
So if I'm gonna be reading this book, right? Like, and then we're talking about it. Like at the end of our conversation, you go, Migs, this is what I really want you to get out of my book. What would that be?
So I'm not gonna answer it specifically directly, like how you asked the question, but I was talking to a 16-year-old, like my girlfriend's younger cousin. He's 16 years old. Actually, he's 15. He said he read the book, and my girlfriend asked him in front of me, like, what is it that you took away? And then he, like, I literally wanted to cry. He was like, well, he's like, after reading it, I realized that like, no matter what, you can do it. Like, even if nobody else in the past looks like you or talks like you or has done it in the past, you can do it. Like, you just have to be disciplined and you have to like put in the work. And like, that made me so happy. And like, that's the goal, is to, as a person of color writing a book, there's not very many of us, and to like put in all of this work and all this research for like a 15-year-old kid to say like, I can do it, and here's how to do it in this book, or like whatever, you know, like that's amazing, you know.
That's touching.
No, yeah.
That is very
That's
touching.
crazy.
I would cry too. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there's so much research that you did just you know to create the book. I mean, I'm sure you could have wrote chapters and chapters beyond what you wrote. Are there going to be any sequels that you're gonna write?
I might do one on just compound learning, because that is a topic on its own, you know, like pull so many different examples. And I think the power of compound learning is when people do it intentionally. A lot of us do it on accident sometimes. Like, we're like out and about, you realize certain trends, and then in the back of your mind, you have that knowledge, but you don't really intentionally use it. But I might write a book just about that.
You are listening to Kickspot.